So in this video, we're going to show you how to remove and replace the rear brakes on this 17 Compass. Okay, we're going to take the wheel off, 19mm socket. Last lug. Take the tire off. First thing I do is I take the boot off the bleeder screw so that I can open that up. If you do not have a boot on yours, I strongly recommend getting one after. Keeps the dirt out, and it makes it possible not to have to replace the caliper if you ever need to bleed your brakes. I'm just breaking this free so that it's easier for me to open it when I push that caliper back. So we have two caliper bolts that hold the caliper to the bracket. I'm only going to take the bottom one out as long as the caliper is good, because the way they mount this line, the fitting is almost up against that. And with an open end wrench, it kind of spreads and ruins the nut. But you'll see that it's easy to spin back and move and put the silicone or caliper grease in there without dismounting the hose and causing more havoc. So 14mm socket. And it will naturally spin on the top because it is a slider. And now I can just lift this caliper right up. See how it just slides freely right on that? Take that inner pad out. I'll just take a screwdriver or a pry bar. Now I'm going to take this outer pad out with a pry bar or screwdriver. Just pull those ear tabs back and then slide it right down. It kind of sticks in there because it's slide right in. Make sure I'm going the right way. Pushing against that. Now I'm going to open that bleeder screw before I continue to push. Make sure my bucket is underneath. Make sure that the piston's bottomed out. And then we're going to close that bleeder. Give it a good snug. Now we can get our tool out. I'm just going to take a bungee cord and grab this caliper, bring it on up so it doesn't fall down and hit my rotor as I'm trying to remove it. Hopefully you don't, if it's frozen on there and you can get a little movement, as long as the e-brake shoes aren't over adjusted, just give it a quick tap with the hammer, but this one seems to be adjusted perfectly. That's the shoes that it's hitting against. It's just a little snug, but not too tight. Give your e-brake or parking shoes a good examine. Make sure they're not cracked or missing or chipped. So now I'm going to clean up this hub surface before I put my new rotor on. I like to use a wire brush too, and you could probably pick up a nice good little wooden handle or plastic, but you want to get right there where that actual rotor meets that hub. That is where you get a lot of pulsation sometimes if it does not seat correctly. So if you don't have a little buffer tool like that, always reach for the wire brush. Actually, it came up pretty clean. Then I'm going to take a parts cleaner and I'm going to clean up the parking shoes plus that hub before I reinstall. Just get rid of any additional caliper dust or brake dust, And while I'm waiting for that to dry, I can take my little screwdriver or pry bar, and I'm going to pop these old tins right off. There's the bottom, and then there's a top one. We're going to take that same wire brush to those, because we want a nice smooth matting surface where that will hit. I will do the same to the top. You can actually use your fingers sometimes. You might feel that if there's any rust lips. Seems to be fine, so I'm just going to use a little cleaner, get rid of it. So I'm going to take I use a copper never seize, or anti-seize. Copper is a high temp. I'm not going to coat these shoes, parking shoes. I just want to get that hub where it hits, right there, to stop any future oxidization between the aluminum rim and the steel rotor. So now I'm going to put my new tins on. I'm just going to take my high temp dielectric grease or brake caliper grease, and I'm just going to skim the little bracket here so that water doesn't get underneath and form a rust line. And on this particular model, both tins are the same size. It's always good to grab them, make sure there's not a top or bottom or a left or right. This one seems to be the same. They're going to ride on both sides of that bracket and just push down and snap it down, just like that. Make sure it's fully seated. Do the same to the top. I do not put grease on the top of that slider. I want these pins to, to ride real free and not get any dirt, grime collected by the grease that some people put on the top. Now I'm going to put my inner pad in so that way I can see everything I'm doing here. My inner pad, you've got an outer pad and an inner pad. The outer pad on these rear have these butterfly clips that they call, and it's like a anti-rattle clip. And it also has these two big metal divots that are going to ride on the inside of these caliper ear. So you can actually put this on if you want to, because it needs to go on first. See how it sits flush? Make sure that pad is flush with those ears. This one, I'm going to put an indicator on it. So I'm going to put a pad wear indicator. You always want it to go on the top, so into the actual rotor. In this case, it's going forward, so I would put this indicator on the bottom. So that's the first contact of that rotor going around. We have a nice little indent where this is going to sit, just like this. Make sure it's flat. Now you can take that brake pad and seat it right in. Now on this car, we're putting in our drill slotted rotors, which are performance rotors, and you want these slots in the drills to go into the wind, not ride with it, but cut into it. Make sure it's seated. So I'm going to take a small pocket screwdriver and I'm going to line the inside of this boot after I examined it, made sure there was no cuts, it's not torn, and I'm going to put the silicone inside those grooves. That'll help feed the bolt and slider as it goes in and out over the process. And I'm going to do the same to the top as easily as I possibly can because it is kind of stuck in there. See what I can get inside that boot. So now I'm just going to clean up my slider guide pin here. Get all that old stuff off of it. Take a wire brush to it if you think it's needed. This is pretty clean other than that. See how they're flat right there? That's a good indication of where you want to pack this, because then it will stay in that little groove. Put a little extra on the end of it. There's plenty in that boot, so I'm not too worried about it. Now we can undo the bungee cord. Take that completely off and out of the way. Let this caliper fall right down in. Make sure the boot doesn't get hit. We'll slide that new slider. We'll slide it right in. Just working all the air out of there. I'll make sure I start that by hand. I'll just bottom it out before I torque it. Torque specs to this caliper slider bolt is 32 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to go pump up the brakes, get that piston to seat itself, then I'll gravity bleed the bleeder. Now that I've pumped up the brakes, filled that cylinder up with brake fluid, I'm going to just crack this open and let it gravity bleed. Make sure no air is in the system. Once I feel like I have a steady stream with no air bubbles, we're good to go. Always road test, confirm the pedal is a firm pedal and doesn't sink down slowly at complete stops. If it sinks slowly down at complete stops, then you have air in the system. Should not need more than just a gravity bleed when you use this process. Now I'll take cleaner. I'm going to clean the area. And put the boot back on. This prevents any dirt and dust from getting in that bleeder. All right, now we can put our wheel back on. Always start your lug nuts by hand. $19mm socket. And we're just going to snug them up in a star pattern, and then we'll torque it to factory specs. Torque spec is 100 foot-pounds. 19mm socket, and we will go in a star pattern. Double check. And after doing any brake work, always top off or check your brake fluid level. And when topping off brake fluid, always check your manual for the proper grade, or the cap might say it. So it could say DOT 3 or DOT 4. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.